All right. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report. Hope everybody is well. Yeah, took a few days to kind of catch myself, so I haven't been on in a minute. Nevertheless, we back in here. And this is actually a subscriber requested video. So we're going to get into that. But as I usually say, welcome to the Onyx Report, where black male justice advocates uplift black men and boys using critical analysis. Sometimes that has to do with news events, and a good portion of the time it has to do with media. That's one of my particular interests. Being a latchkey Generation X kid, I grew up watching a lot of media, and it took years for me to figure out what I was actually being fed. So I like to do media from time to time to get some of that out. But today we're going to, cover a series that I probably wouldn't have watched if it wasn't for y'all. So shout out to y'all. Real quick, let me first shout out Dardar for twice donating to the show. So like, share, subscribe, join, and donate if you would. Support the show so we can give you this independent black male thought. As you can see on the screen, there are other options as well, such as the Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and of course Patreon, where you can become a patron of the show here on YouTube, the Onyx Report. You can also be a patron of the Institute for Black Male Studies, as well as the Onyx TV network. So you can support all three, or of course you can hit the super chat right here on YouTube. But make sure, if you haven't subscribed, you also join and become a member, either here or on Patreon, but it's up to you. But shout out to Dardar for the two donations. Shout out to David White. Says support black media, heading into work, gonna catch the replay. That's what's up. Appreciate that. We're gonna get it in. But let me start out by shouting out some of the regulars who are in here. What's up, Joe? Says he just finished the series. Can't wait for your take. Hey man, later on, for those of you that have seen it, I will welcome you to come up, give your thoughts. Because I don't think this is one that too many of us in this circle have watched, but I think there's something in it to check out. Shout out to Malika. Shout out to Urban Naturalist Apothecary. Shout out to Techno Pirate. Ron Matthews, what's up? Lil Rock, Ronin, Miguelito, Blue Collar, Mr. Blue Collar, what's good? HP Benin, Floyd, what's up? Okay, Joshua, Quiz, what's up? Good to see you. MLR, always good to see you, man. Marcus, Donnie, what's up? GC, The Watcher, yeah, D Remedy, yeah, Life Lessons for Men. What's going on? Yeah, man, that's who I heard it from. Well, I had a couple of brothers send me messages to watch this series a while ago. And I kept saying, okay, I'll get to it. And then Manosphere Highlights, hit it up. And he did an excellent, so far, I think it's 3 episodes where he's broken it down and he's shown clips. But he, in order to see that, you got to be on his Patreon, which I did. I joined. So I've been watching him, his show for quite a while now. I like Manosphere Highlights Daily. But yeah, man, he covered it beautifully. But this was one I couldn't skip over, so I had to get in here. So y'all check out Manosphere Highlights Daily as well. I think it's the last 3 episodes. He mixes this in with world events, but he does an excellent job breaking the series down. Mr. Khan, what's up? Creative. What's going on, AB? Grade I9. K. The original wannabe. Imari. High Scholar. What's up, man? Mawada. What's good, man? Almanize. Trauma. Better You. Dr. Nelson, what's up? Good to see you. All right. Yeah. So, but I, as usual, I enjoy having my people in here with me. So I got one of my guests here already. Hopefully the other one will come in soon, but let me go ahead and introduce, nonetheless, a friend of the show who has been on a couple of different times to help me chop a few things up and bring in Layman's Journal. What's good, man?
What's going on, Dr. T? Chat, everybody else.
Yeah, man. We gotta have you come in, man. When we're dealing with some of this, I gotta have you, if possible. And Layman was kind enough to watch it. I think within a relatively short period of time. I think I messaged you less than a week ago.
Yeah, I had to binge watch it last weekend. It was a rough go, but I got through it.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So we got Aquateki in the building, Naldo, M Lavo, Hootsie, what's up? And shout out to M Lavo. It says, bless you, Doc and fellows here today. Please stop posting those skits with the guy on the way to the gym and the woman wants to talk. Okay. You got the one I put on Facebook. Anyway, but yeah, man, I appreciate you watching it. Shout out to Hurricane. Appreciate that support. Because I thought this was a series I wasn't in a rush to catch.
Mm-hmm.
And truth be told, like I said, if it wasn't for Manosphere Highlights, I probably would have continued to lag on watching it. But
Right.
when he covered a couple of key scenes, I was like, oh, they're going there.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. So, I changed gears, went different directions. So let me sit down and watch this. And I watched, all 9 episodes. It's only 1 season.
Right.
They're questioning if they'll get a second. A lot of these shows don't get a second season,
Right.
So I'm not sure if it's coming back or not. But it is based on a book. And apparently the book does go past where the first season goes. So we'll see if we can get into that. That depends on whether my other guest comes. But, just to kind of start out, what were your impressions of it from the moment you heard about it, whenever that was, to, actually starting to watch it?
Oh, man. I actually saw the same series of videos that you saw with Manosphere Highlights Daily.
Okay.
And I had never heard of the show. Never heard of it. And I'm watching his videos and I'm like, oh boy, this is they really coming after it. They really coming after us. They really going.
Yeah.
So I had an idea because I'm one of the 5 people that watch She-Hulk. And I watched all the episodes and I see some of the same elements that they had in the She-Hulk, the same villains that they put in this show as well.
Right.
And I said, oh, this is going to be a trip. Yeah.
Well, before we jump in, let me just quickly remind you guys to go ahead and check out the upcoming book I have coming out. You'll be able to see it right there. Let me move some things over here. And right now they have a mid-year sale, 20% off. So the book is about pretty much just over $50. So check it out and put the link. The link stays in the description box. I will also put it in the chat if you're interested. but it'll be shipped in August, so it's coming quickly. I forgot where they put the date for that. Oh, there it is. Yeah, shipped after August 15th, so available for pre-order on July 25th. So we're coming up on that soon, so just keep your eye out for it. Take advantage of it. It's all good. So just wanted to kind of put that in your ear real quick. But yeah. So as far as dealing with this, like I said, man, this was one I was really sleeping on, because to me, I've seen other ones that reminded me of this, and I can tell you, even after watching it, I felt I was right. If you remember when we covered the show "Why the Last Man,"
Okay.
I want to say it's a couple of years ago, probably. BGS and I jumped into that series. It was also, there were things in it that reminded me of. Oh goodness, what's the other one? I was just talking about it yesterday. It'll come back to me. The name of it escapes me. I'm seeing the characters right in my face, but they dealt with a lot of racial issues, but you still had this strong feminist push in it. And this was before the Woman King, where you got the first kind of glimpse of this Woman King, Black Panther-esque, black female performance. But the show escapes me. It'll come to me later. But either way, there've been a couple of these shows, and they seldom get a second season, because one of the things I noticed is, even though they seem to really be hell-bent on this feminist revenge porn, it ends up turning into Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
And these women start killing everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody, man. So, I just thought this might be different, even though it has the same feminist, kind of focus, the same kind of, feminist revenge porn, the same kind of, all powerful females, except for this one, it's women as a whole, not so much a given woman. But here, let me put some of this up. So I figure we can start by kind of breaking some of this down. In terms of what the show is fundamentally about. So, if you wouldn't mind, man, just kind of introduce us to what the show is about from your vantage point.
Okay, so The Power is about a show that explores the possibility of what can happen if women are given the ability to have control or power over men. And so with this physical power, it comes in the form of like this electrical discharge that they can push out through their hands. They call it EOD. And what they find out is that it's some type of an organ that a woman has over her collarbone bone that gives her this electric eel-like power. So some of them can actually touch, but others can actually project their electricity onto other targets.
Right.
And it kind of reminds me of the X-Men in the sense that it's like a evolution of this new organ that they found. And it starts off with it only being active in teenage girls when they hit puberty.
Right.
But as we find out later, they can activate it in all women by simply touching them and charging it off.
Right. And then they have this kind of, ecstasy, almost orgasmic experience, and that enlivens their power. And then you got women across age that are going around, shocking people and whatnot. So
that right there was a trip. The whole metaphor behind that, them awakening their powers. But the story is told from the perspective of 6 different people. So we got the mayor of Seattle, Margot Cleary Lopez. Notice the hyphenation. She's a strong woman that needs her independence.
Right. And that's her in the middle of the image there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Toni Collette, I think that is. And we also have her daughter, Joss,
Toni
who also has the power.
Yeah, so Toni Collette, and then you have her daughter, who's played by, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Aaliyah Carvalho. I'm butchering it. I know I am. But,
I didn't even try.
And that's her on the far left over here. The daughter. That's supposed to be her daughter, but you tell me if that works. But
no, it doesn't.
2 out of 3 of her kids, I'm like, nah.
Yeah. Then we have John Leguizamo, who plays her, her wife, so to say.
He does.
Play a person named Rob Lopez.
He does.
And we have their son Matt, and he's into some things we're gonna talk about later.
Right.
He's not necessarily on board on all this.
Right.
And then we go on to the black girl Eve or Allie. I forget how they gonna call her name, but she is the an abused orphan that's being raised by foster parents.
Right.
And this girl, well, I'll get into that. She actually hears voices in her head. Okay, and from there we have a woman named a girl named Roxy Monk. Now she's the daughter of a mobster over in London, and she's a very rough character,
right?
And the dynamic she has with her father, her brothers, and her stepmother, and her biological mother,
right? And
then we have
that's her on the second to right in the bloody white top right there. Well, go ahead.
Then we have the biggest beta on the show, Tunde. Oh man, this guy right here. Every time he got on screen, I was annoyed with him. But he's this young lad down in Nigeria,
right?
Who's an aspiring journalist. But he really does push the feminist talking points.
Yeah, hard.
And from there we have Tatiana Moskalev. She is the first lady of a fictional Eastern Bloc country. Where they have a lot of trafficking going on, and she's married to, of course, this pig of a man who made her a child bride. And
it's supposed to be the country with the most trafficking in the world. I think that's how they presented it.
Right. And it's interesting because we also see them go into Saudi Arabia. So you go, they go into Saudi Arabia, they go into London, they go into the United States and Nigeria, and you see all these women supposedly be oppressed. But when it came to the Eastern Bloc country, they decided to go with a fictional name.
Right.
I thought that was kind of strange, but
and that's the image on the far right. That's the woman there.
Yeah.
They're missing in this particular image, and I didn't get a chance to grab an image. They're missing her sister, so we'll get to her as well.
That's right. Yeah. She was a up and coming gymnast.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just like you. When I saw this, it was feminist rage corn to me. It was bra burning and all that good stuff. And so the show operates on this premise that women are being oppressed globally, that they're being disenfranchised, that they're not safe, they don't have equal opportunities. And so they talk about how this power probably developed as a survival mechanism to fight against men and oppression. And we were talking about how the moment where these women are awakening their powers and they have this orgasmic moment, but not just because it necessarily feels good, but it's like this euphoria of freedom, of equality that they have that really wakes them up. And yeah, it's a lot of BS, but that was my opening.
Well, yeah,
overview of the show.
And I think now I've read before I actually started the series. I not only watched the trailer, I actually read a couple of the critics' reviews, which I'm usually pretty indifferent about. But one critic, kind of nailed it. And then as I watched it, I realized he was right. Just in terms of the storytelling element, he was saying that it does a little too much for itself in the sense that you have so many different stories going at the same time that it switches from story to story. And one of the things he said was the problem is you have some stories that are really well done. And then you have other stories that are, not as important, not as interesting. And they give, he said, sometimes you end up give too much time to the stories that are less interesting and not enough to the ones we want to know more about. And as I watched it, I said, okay, I can agree with that because it's flitting from person to person. And there's so many, lead characters in this, and it's spread out, across different countries. Like almost every major character is in another country except for, Toni Collette's family. And whatnot. So it's really kind of spread out, and that makes doing a review a little difficult, especially if you can't show any video.
Right.
Y'all know how YouTube is with copywriting. It makes it hard for people to keep up. So I just, I caught a few images that I thought might help, but none of it will do it full justice because there's just so many stories going on at the same time. But I figured we could start in the order that it kind of gives us with the revelation of this stuff. And I'll start here with Tunde because I think you and I shared a particular view of
this dude.
So you kind of see him coming home. I think it was Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
He's coming home to visit. He's I think he's successful. He's just starting his career out. He's successful, doing what I think his family wanted him to do, but he wants to be a journalist.
Right.
And it looks like his best friend, who's another picture I wasn't able to find right away, this Nigerian woman, she's, you know, kind of caught on to this story, and she gives him hints about it, but she doesn't really tell him. So, right. You know, he actually, she drives him, I guess, home from the airport. He leaves her to go date this, to have this woman that's come over to his house. So he's, you know, he's about to get down with her. And he experiences for the first time being shocked.
Right.
Now, you know, literally he's about to get down with this woman. She shocks him. I think she touched his back or something and shocked him. He didn't know what it was. It freaked him out, but it also freaked the woman out. Because it's not like these women know what's going on. It is, you know, as Journal said, it's supposed to be an evolutionary shift where, you know, all these young women across the world, or most young women, not all, most young women develop this talent, this ability, and it's supposed to be an evolutionary defense from men, right? This is the subtext. They're telling us that evolution has sought these women out to protect them from men by giving them this power.
Right. And that was the first monologue when the show begins. With the mayor, where she talks about imagine a world where we have power, where God looks like us, where we're the ones to be feared. I think, and that threw me for a loop. She said, we're the ones to be feared.
Right.
You know, and we can have control, and we're going to have this revolution, and all it takes is a spark because we don't have to be afraid anymore.
Right.
You know, she said, even says, you know, we can have this if we're willing to burn down the world as it is. You know, and, you know, it's funny because, well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, because throughout the majority of the show, even though she has these radical ideas, okay, but she's like, all the women are psychopathic on the show, but she comes, you know,
he's right though.
She tries to come across as the pragmatic one because she's the politician. So she's not using the radical language, but you know she has the ideology in her head.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of surprised because you hear her give this radical speech in the beginning, but then when the show starts, she gets back into the politician mode, and you kind of want to believe that she's a good guy.
Well, but the way they also present her, so she's the mayor of Seattle, but she ends up operating under the senator, you know, the senator, and so who's a guy, of course. And so he is, you know, the face of her oppression. Like she can't really be free as a mayor and advocate for what she values because this oppressive white man is over her, and this is what oppresses her, right? So one of the things I will say overall that we see most consistently is, you know, they really lean into male oppression. Every relationship, you know, every situation, the one thing you don't want to happen in a room exactly happens. Like they lean into the worst moments, you know, for each character where they're oppressed by men, violated by men in every way imaginable,
right? Which
serves as a justification for the kind of rage porn, right?
Yeah,
or at least they attempt it to be a justification, but
yeah.
So,
and I don't want to get you know, forget about Tunde, but even with the like you said, we were talking about, every one of these women commits some type of homicide or attempt to.
Right.
But you know, they all say, well, he deserved it. He was a jerk. He was bad.
Exactly.
You know, even with the mayor towards the end. But getting on with Tunde, one of the things that I noticed, and I noticed it early, and I wanted to see if they were going to carry on with this thing throughout the rest of the show. I noticed that when it came to, because there are some men that are good guys and bad guys, but all of the bad guys were white men who were also the only masculine men in the show. Okay. You know, so Governor Dordan, the mob boss Bernie Monk, the president Moskalev, Matt, I guess you could say he's biracial. That's the mayor's daughter. Even with Eve's adoptive father. We're going to talk about Urban Docs, I guess. But they were all the normal masculine guys. But when it came to the guys that were non-white, who were the quote allies, they were all minorities. Now, I'm guessing they think that was supposed to be a compliment to us. as the role of a minority male is supposed to be a sidekick to a woman or an advocate for feminism.
Well, for them, we represent the new masculinity, right? The new masculinity it's supposed to be more progressive, more accepting, and thus more willing to play this role of being what feminists end up using. It ends up becoming the wife. But the way they try to articulate it, even in theory, is that you're more accepting, you're more flexible and open, and you're not challenged by a woman's power. They present it that way, but really, when you get down to brass tacks, you become a wife, which is exactly what, as you said earlier, John Leguizamo's character is. But
even with Tunde, I think it was a scene where he goes to Saudi Arabia to cover this revolution that's going on with the women.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're just frying all the men.
Yes.
But he's able to get in there and just, mix in with them because they don't see him as a threat.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, for most of that, but let me back up a minute. So the thing with Tunde, he sneaks out, and decides to go find his friend, the one that drove him from the airport, and he wants to see what this story is. He brings his camera with him, and he's out. I don't want to say in the bush, but he's just out of the city. I don't know Nigeria enough to speak on where he goes. But he ends up finding where she is, and he sneaks into this house, and he's just kind of watching her hanging out with a bunch of women. And, the next thing you know, they start, sharing this electricity. So they're discovering this, they're using it, they're playing with it. And he starts recording video. And the moment they finally catch him, the women surround him, and one of the women immediately tries to kill him. Right. And his homegirl jumps in the way and catches the shock, and she's unconscious. The reason this is important is because Tunde is the first to videotape this and put it online.
Right.
Which is where the mayor of Seattle sees it. Women all over the world see it, and they're connecting it to what's happening, around them. So Tunde is the first to put this up for the world to see. But it's interesting to observe the first guy that actually sees a woman doing it. The first thing she tries to do is kill him. And this is what I mean when I say Lord of the Flies. This is just the beginning. This is the first time a guy has seen this happen. And the first instance is murder. So this tells you where this whole series is starting to go early on. Right. But so, then a little bit later on, we see Tunde going to, because he ends up having CNN call him. And CNN wants him to, be a what do they call it?
Correspondent or something.
Like a correspondent, and so this is, of course, his dream, which in a way is already a violation, right? It's already a violation. So what they're doing is, even they're saying in a subtle way, even the good guys are still problematic, right? Because he steals this story from his homegirl. She wanted to be the one to break it to the world. She's been following it. She's been writing about it, or at least preparing to, and he ends up introducing it to the world, which of course pissed her off, right? But he becomes a CNN correspondent, and then he goes to, what was it, Afghanistan?
I thought it was Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, okay, yeah, probably. And even in that instance, he gets to Saudi Arabia, and like the first cab driver he finds immediately says something sexist about women. So they're already kind of setting up like, these women are justified, and it's not an accident that they choose Saudi Arabia, right? It's just, this is they're using whatever they can to justify what's about to go down. And so in this, it's one innocent young woman sitting in amongst the trash, playing with this electricity. And of course, the men come and they start to abuse her. The cops come, and they start to abuse her. The women gather together, and then it just turns into a horror film. Just a straight up, just killing men left and right. And they kind of mix it with this march that the women start doing, where they're singing and marching, but on the side they're kind of killing cops at the same time. And I mean, I don't know what you saw in that, but tell me what you saw.
I just saw like a death riot is what I saw it.
He said a death riot.
I mean, that's the best way I could describe it.
How you gonna have people singing and then dying on the side? It made no fucking sense. Usually a death riot is just raw ravage, yelling and screaming. These women are slow song singing, and they're cheering and chanting, and then killing people in corners with cops are. It made no sense. No sense.
No, but if they're killing men, it's okay.
Right. Right. Yeah. And Tunde almost gets killed because he sees, I think it was, he saw one of the men being killed and he ran over. Then he asked her to stop.
Yeah, he calls himself intervening and trying to, I guess, mediate a peace between them. And of course, now he had been there for days, being able to mix within them. But the moment he stands up for a man, they're going to check him for that.
Yeah. And the woman almost kills him, if not for, the grace of another woman who drags him away and takes him to her apartment and hides him for a while. Like it's the most damsel. But it's the most obvious attempt to show, women being sacrificial and anyway. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, he was the damsel in distress in that moment.
Right.
Right. And they go into the apartment and she gives him this lecture about what her intention.
Naldo, you ain't shit for that, Naldo. You ain't shit for that. I'm sorry, you caught me off guard with that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, brother.
Oh yeah, but she gives him this lecture about how I guess he thought he was going to save her or take her out of this area, and she's like, "No, I love my country. I'm going to stay here."
Yeah.
So you see, first you see her rescue him, but then you see her check him for attempting to think that he could rescue her.
Yes. But I think to me in that riot march shit, the most impactful thing is when this group of women now at this point you have young girls, because remember, teenage girls are the ones that just develop the power.
Right.
But once they touch an older woman, they send that electricity through the organ near their collarbone. It enlivens their electricity. So now you're seeing older women, younger women marching, killing people together, hand in hand, singing songs. And then they run up on the military.
Yeah.
The military's there with tanks, guns, the whole deal. And one of the first things I remember is one of the guys who's behind like an M60. I don't know what he's holding. And he's about to let off and kill this crowd of women. Right. His mother stands up out of the crowd and basically gets him to stop.
Yeah.
And so the women just walk by and march while he's there not shooting. None of the cops are really shooting because, it's supposed to be this thing where women can kill you, but you can't respond because they are your mothers, your grandmothers, your cousins, your sisters. So he doesn't respond. And then you kind of find out later that these women never stop killing people. As a matter of fact, they figured out a new method, which is to basically surround a tank and fry it with electricity until it cooks everybody in it.
Right.
So this is what these women are doing, and the guy doesn't want to shoot because his mother told him not to. And we're gonna come back to the military toward the end because it really showed me what they think about how the military would respond to something like this. But anyway. But so that's just Saudi Arabia, right? Let's see. I think we got to go to Seattle, right? Because that's where the main thread of this story comes from. Now, Toni Collette, what is the name of her character? She's Margot Cleary Lopez, right? So Margot is the mayor of Seattle, as we said. That's her family there. You see her husband John Leguizamo. There are 3 kids, and the eldest teenage daughter is, of course, the one that develops her powers. She's one of the early ones to do so in that area. Except hers operates a little differently. She has the electricity, but it usually sets things on fire.
Right.
And her name is Joss. So any thoughts about Joss's story? And I would say, psychopathic is real, but go ahead.
Joss is temperamental. I mean, where do I start with her? I mean, I guess I gotta get this off my chest. The fact that she tries to fry her brother to death twice.
Thank you. Yes.
That blows my mind.
Yes.
Even when you talk about her brother who disagrees with everything that's going on, her immediate response is to check him by insulting him. Yeah. Oh, you're just one of those idiots. You're listening to one of these radicals. You sound just like them. She's a temperamental character, but the mother is very, very, I guess you say protective, or I'm what I'm looking for. She relates to her more than most of her mother. Say it again.
You said her mother?
Yeah. You see the relationship between Mayor Lopez and Joss more so than the other kids, where she seems to be the one that she fixates on. But her story starts with her, frying the microwave.
Right. So
and dealing with the whole thing, and I think her power, she comes to embrace her power because one of the I guess you say some radical girl at the school,
mhm,
tells her to embrace it and talks about how wonderful it is.
right.
But she even develops a little boyfriend in sorts in the show.
I couldn't find a picture of him, but of course we got to talk about him. But we'll get to that. See, this is why I needed help, because there's so many different elements in these 9 episodes that it would just take too long with one person trying to cover everything, right? But part of the subtext with the mayor here is that she is this overworked, superpowered, as BGS would call her, a 92, right? She's the mayor, but she's overworked. She's busy. She doesn't have enough time for her kids, but she's trying to have it all. She wants to be, in a position of authority. She wants to be a good mother, and she's failing at one or the other at any given point in time. So she's very frustrated in that sense. And her husband is very reassuring. But he's also very passive aggressive.
Mhm.
And so he feels a certain way about, his position in the family, but he never particularly articulates it. He's the one that cooks for the kids, cleans up after them, who deals with their day to day, including his oldest daughter.
Mhm.
Until, now what's stereotypical about the daughters in this series is they're pretty much a mess. All of them are pretty rebellious. And this is before the electricity. They're problematic. They are the quintessential TV teen daughters. They're annoying, they're argumentative, they're everything. But now you give them this power to kill people at random, and you tell me where that goes, right? So he's still trying to identify with his daughter, and she doesn't want. She's going through things. Her body is changing, and so she doesn't want to talk to anybody. And she's sarcastic as hell, and and these fathers just sit there and take it.
Because I mean, even with John Leguizamo, you see him whine and argue to his wife, to the mayor, as if he's the wife. You didn't ask me about my day. You're not paying attention to the kids. Right. And I had to stand up and clap when the boy said, you emasculate him. He's the one who does all the cooking, because even the boy sees something is not right with these gender roles here.
Well, the young man you guys can see in the image on the far right is her son. And he's I think he's like 14, 15. He's not particularly liking this whole thing when he finds out about the electricity, but he's pretty calm about it until his sister shocks him. So they're fighting over the remote control. And if you guys have siblings, you already know what that is. So he's watching the show. She done come in and changed it. So they fighting over it. And she shocks him to the point where it burns the top quarter of his face. So he has visible scarring behind it. And he has to go to the hospital and the whole deal. So after that, you really see him change gears. And what he starts to do in the long run is he starts to delve into this world's manosphere.
Yeah.
They have a manosphere, but they represent it as one guy who calls himself Urban Docs and uses AI to hide his identity, right? So they're riffing on the manosphere. They're calling manosphere guys cowardly. They're hiding their face. They're not man enough to stand up for what they believe in. They're sexist. They're hyper macho. All the critiques you've heard in the mainstream of the manosphere, they use in this series, but the manosphere is represented by really one guy in this.
Right. Yeah, and he's like a composite of the manosphere, QAnon, the Proud Boys, the MAGA hat guys, because they wear the T-shirts. And they're the internet trolls who come in and say all these crazy things. And clearly, like you were saying, the media is paying attention to the space.
Yes.
Like we talked about this with the She-Hulk, how they try to do the same thing, because in that show, the manosphere, so to say, was the villain.
Yeah.
And
the mayor even describes it at one point. She says, why should we care about some incels sitting in their basements playing video games and masturbating?
Exactly. So they're using every cliche. And they're trying to, even when they try to use now they get the language wrong. They try to use the talking points. I remember I saw a clip of John Leguizamo in an interview where he described his character as a Sigma. Well, he's clearly a beta. That's another story. But it just speaks to how they really don't understand. They just have the clippings of what they think it's about.
I've experienced this in real life, and I've seen it in these shows. What they do is you have women in particular who are comfortable with dismissively misdescribing the manosphere, knowing that they haven't watched any of it.
Right.
They've really taken talking points from other women who may themselves have not watched any of it, and they're
Yeah.
comfortable with describing something they haven't bothered to watch. Now, I've seen this happen in real life. I've had women that I had one woman, I remember she was walking behind me and she looked over my shoulder and she saw the title to one of the papers I was writing and decided to give me a 10-minute refutation of my argument based off the title that she read. She didn't even know what the paper was about other than the title. And I sat there and I just, I wanted to explore this. I wanted to know, how far will this arrogance go where you can tell me how I'm wrong about something and you don't even know what I'm saying and haven't bothered to listen. But I had to sit through feminist classes as a requirement to get my degree. So I had to read generations worth of feminists making sometimes the most egregious misandric arguments, but you don't have the wherewithal to listen to a 5 to 20-minute video for you to even know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So they've transported that type of argumentation to a television show, right? And now these women can just glibly make remarks about these sexist men that hate women. That's the way they mostly describe men that are critical of feminism, men in the manosphere. That's how they do it.
Yeah.
It's brother earlier was right. A little bit of Andrew Tate is in the Urban Docs character as well. But go ahead.
Right. And it's your typical, the tyranny of cliches. And you come across these groups of women, they really don't understand what it is you're talking about. So what they do is they come up with a list of adjectives of what you are.
Right.
And it's the cliches of t-shirt slogans. You're sexist, misogynist. You just don't like women. They never really engage the meat of what you're talking about. It's all dismissive language.
It is. But the thing about it is, I will say on this series, they either hired at least one or two dudes from the manosphere or something, because when this teenage kid starts talking, I'm like, that's not how feminists write. Somebody consulted his lines, because there were points where he was so on point. I was like, ooh. And that's one of the things that made this series different. This is one of the things that inspired me when Manosphere Highlights Daily showed it. He showed clips of this young man in several different instances arguing with his family about how they were acting, about what was going on in the world. And his analysis was cold. I was like, somebody is consulting on some of this shit. Somebody.
Yeah.
But, so that's the dynamic with this family. I guess we can talk about her boyfriend.
Oh, man.
I don't know if you want to.
Oh, man. That dude, I guess it's a dude, because we find out later in the story that he too has the power. Now, keep in mind, this is also a minority male, because
he's an Asian cat, right?
Right. Because that's the only allies, and so we find out he has the power because he was born, quote, intersex. So he has both reproductive organs, and when he was a baby, they kept the male parts, not the female parts.
Right.
But he has a higher estrogen level.
Right.
So he has the organ in him, and he also has the power.
Well, No, go ahead.
Yeah, but all through the show, you see him in that effeminate role. Even when they're in the car fooling around, he's the one saying, "Wait, no, I don't want to do." He's the girlfriend. So
but he freaked out when she got to taking his pants off. That's when they were in the car messing around. So mind you, she's had a crush on this dude for a while. He's kind of popular in school, handsome Asian dude, a little effeminate, but nothing you can really put your finger on. So they start kind of dating, and they're in this car rolling around and kissing, and then she starts trying to take stuff off. Right. And he's gently saying, no. Until she gets to his belt buckle, and then he starts grabbing her and he throws her to the other side of the car.
Right.
And and you're, as the watcher, you're going, all right, I've been a dude who's not been in the mood, but I ain't never thrown a woman across the room because of. But so you don't know if there's something wrong with his genitalia, but I noticed that's when he kind of intensified, right? But he got his power because she accidentally shocked him one day. Right. She came in, she touched the locker, and he was a little further away, leaning on the locker, and the shock, he tells us later, woke up his. But mind you have to understand, he is the only male presenting person in the world that exhibits this power. And I kind of thought the men would develop some evolutionary thing too, but they didn't. So he's the only guy in the world that has it. And when he tells his girlfriend later to explain, why he didn't want to have sex, and he starts to tell her, I'm intersexed, and then he tells her about the power, her first reaction is that she's pissed at him. because he didn't stand with the rest of the women who were basically taken out of all their high school classes. Exactly. And I guess they were put in the gymnasium and they were handcuffed, and like, you know, people got tired of their shit because these women were setting stuff on fire.
Right.
You know, they were shocking people, and anytime they had an emotional reaction to something, they were damn near ready to kill people. So the school just said, fuck it, and just put all the women in the gymnasium, had them sit in these seats, and they were handcuffed. So she got upset with him for not standing with the women. He takes off and leaves. And when he comes back, he's trying to woo her at the window, and he's demonstrating his power to her. And there's a big heart on the ground, and he's lit up with his powers. And the little brother that you see on the screen on the right, he's looking out his window and he witnesses this.
Right.
And he videotapes it and he sends it to Urban Docs, who's the manosphere, right? So this is not only the first guy that exhibits this power, but now it's been sent to the world. And in response, I'll just close it here. The mayor ends up kind of sending him with his family's permission to some institution that they don't tell you about, right? But that's that. But is there, I guess we can come back to Seattle on the end because we have to in terms of the debate. Is there anything else you want to say about Seattle before we move on?
I think at this point we see the boy is like you said, uploading with Urban Docs. He's getting closer to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think at that point, what was it? The governor at this point is getting more aggressive, and he's starting to overstep the authority of the mayor and getting involved with what's happening in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So even when it starts with the plane crash, he takes control of it. And even with the situation with the school board, I think he brings in the feds and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where and it's this whole theme of, I'm a woman, I don't get to be in charge, and here comes this evil man doing my job for me.
Right.
This man who told me not to get my panties in the bunch.
Right. Right. So he's the big bad white man that's keeping her oppressed as this wealthy mayor. But anyway, so you have that. Let's switch over to one of the more popular stories as well.
Mm-hmm.
This one here. You want to give us your take on this character and this story?
Oh yeah, no, I kind of had a hard time following them because their accents are so heavy.
Yeah, I'm bad with accents too.
Yeah. So from what I can gather, she is the daughter of a London-based mobster. And I think he has 3 sons, and she's his only daughter. I think it was through an affair or something like that, because she's the same age as one of his boys.
Right.
And I get the impression that he really doesn't want to claim her as his child. He's more invested in the children that he has with his sons. I think he's even at one point where he gives a toast and he mentions his 3 sons.
Right.
And he mentions his son's wife. If I remember correctly, but not her.
Not her, right?
Right. So she learns only early on that my father is rejecting me, and it kind of maybe has something to do with his actual wife not wanting him to acknowledge her. But you see her trying to earn the approval of her father. She wants to step up into the business, and it's funny because of his 3 sons, they don't really have the heart for it, but she does.
Right. She's a thug.
Yeah. Right. There you go.
She's really a thug, but the other thing, so she's a thug, but she's also the daughter of the side piece, and she doesn't understand why the father doesn't really uplift the side piece and his child out of that. But, so she's grappling with issues around whether or not she's worthy or, and that's the father there on the screen, as you can see, the mob boss, right? And he's trying to set his kids up into the business and whatnot. So she gets this power right when something tragic is happening, right? So on this particular night, the same night you see her here, she and her mother are hanging out at the house, and these 2 guys bust in the house. Now, so this happens, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe they're here to rob them. No, this is the most stereotypical thing that 2 guys can do in a feminist movie, right? They knock them, they started, punching and hitting these women, they tie them up, and then they start raping them. Excuse me, I just said graping. I forget I'm on YouTube. And so in the midst of this, she develops the power and kills one of them. And again, every time most of the time they show you one of these women getting these powers, somebody dies. But they try to make the crime so egregious that it kind of justifies it. but it happens so often, you know, it ends up kind of, I think, working against them. But anyway, so she kills one guy, the other guy gets away, and her mother dies. And you can see her here covered in her mother's blood, really in shock. And this is, I think, the wedding party. So this is after the wedding. She goes back to the wedding party where her father or brothers are supposedly at. And she's in shock, but she's still covered in her mother's blood. So anything else you want to add to this one?
Yeah, you know, and we find out later what really happened, because it was pretty obvious from the beginning, you know, what happened between we and her mother. We'll get to it later. But yeah, her mother is killed, and she goes to her father for help, because remember, he's the mobster, he's the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he promises that he's going to call the cops and work with the police, which is strange because that's not what he's about. He's supposed to be this tough guy. Mm-hmm. She just assumes he's going to go out there and get these guys right away. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of, you know, banging on the table, say, hey, you're supposed to be, what's his name? Bernie Monk. You don't work with the police.
Right.
But, you know, and again, what we were saying, you know, because she, like you said, she's the thug. She's the more aggressive one. Her two other brothers, they're more or less mopes. The older brother's more soft, and she's the one who's out for blood. Right. And so, you know, she always wants to work with her father, but it's the death of her mother that kind of compels her to become her father's muscle.
Right. Because, and here's the thing, even amongst women around the world, her particular power is pretty strong.
Right.
It seems to be stronger than most. So that's one of the things they tell you. There are different levels of intensity that various women have. And so far, she is, you know, one of the top two most powerful that we see in the entire series. So she's shocking the shit out of things, and it's easy. And you see her really become a full-on thug. She becomes a goon, you know, and tries to be the muscle for her father, even when he doesn't want her to be, simply because she has, you know, the ability, but hers is on extra. Right.
Right. And he tells her, you know, I can't have you working for me because you're too hot-headed. Mm-hmm. You're too temperamental. Mm-hmm. And we see that how her rage actually makes, like you were saying, one of the more stronger characters.
Right. Right. So number of things happen there. And so her whole thing is finding her mother's killer.
Right.
And the mystery about how it happens, why her father isn't really supporting the search with the same kind of intensity she thinks he should have. You know, obviously, if you ain't figured it out by now, we're doing spoilers. So it is what it is. We're probably not going to cover everything in order, but we're going to get to what we can get to. So with her, she finds out who the killer is. And it turns out it's something that was set up by her father.
Yes.
Right?
We find out that her mother was actually an informant. Mm-hmm. And she was working with police, and she was actually having a relationship with one of the officers who was investigating her father. Right. The father finds out, he comes to kill, not her. He comes to kill the mother, because we find out later that the older brother tells her, when she starts to piece it together what's happening, he says, hey, you know, Roxy, I didn't want you at my wedding. Dad wanted you there because he didn't want you to be in the apartment, because he was intentionally trying to take out your mother. Right. Because she was having a relationship with this cop. Right. And she starts to put things together, and she finds the cop, and the cop tells her, says, yes, that's actually true. I loved your mother, but your father, you know, deleted her as a warning to me to back off. And of course, and that's another thing. You see how he becomes the coward so quickly. He's the police. Mm-hmm. He backs off the investigation and destroys the evidence against him.
Right.
You know, but of course she has the will and courage to confront her father on the issue.
Right. And you know, and then from there, there's a point where her father is trying to have her killed. So she's hiding and running out of town. Right.
Right.
And so we'll get to that as well. Because, you know, some of these things are connected. Other things, maybe not so much yet. So we're just kind of flipping around the different characters. We got to deal with this. So this is a woman so Carpathia is the fictional, you know, city that's the capital for trafficking, right?
Right.
And this is the first lady, right? So her husband is the president or whatnot, and he is, you know, a glutton, overweight, cold-hearted, abusive. He's not really smacking her around. His abusiveness is that he's you know, he doesn't care about her feelings. You know, she's just a prop to him. And, you know, and you can see she's well off. You know, she kind of lives in almost her own portion of the mansion. They just see each other to eat and occasionally have sex. and she's faking orgasms and sitting there reading magazines while he's plowing away until he comes, and then he just kind of walks away. They just let you know that this is just a political, really kind of arrangement. You look good and stay quiet in front of the cameras, do what you need to do, your service to your husband, and then you go about your way, and whatever. That's kind of the arrangement they have. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's the Russian, child bride.
Right.
She starts off, she's poor, she's starving, she's not really making it. She wants to be a gymnast.
Mm-hmm.
And she seems to be on that track. I mean, even going back with that, her parents know that she's gifted. Now it's her and her younger sister, but you see them prioritize her because she has the gift and the ability.
Right.
And she's trying to go to the Olympics, and you see him come along. I think she's like maybe 14, 16 years old. Mm. And by this time, he's already an old man, maybe in his 40s, and he's a disgusting pig of a man.
Right.
And he asks her out on a date.
Right.
And she's kind of traumatized by it because she doesn't want to marry this old man. He's disgusting. And, she tells her mother, and she says, of course you're going to marry him. And of course you're going to sleep with him, because she thinks it's for the benefit of the family. Mm-hmm. So early on, you want to see her as a hero because she was victimized as a child. Now she, I don't know, they all bad, but she might even be one of the worst. Who knows? But
yeah, she about to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like you said, they have this cold relationship. And at one point during the show, her husband, he doesn't really care. All he cares about is his food, sex, and keeping his position as the president. He's not really paying attention to it.
Right.
But we see her develop the power because one of her, I guess you say her assistants has it.
Oh man. Yeah. So she has this Asian assistant that does her hair or something like that, or makeup. And there's a point once they figure out that these powers are happening around the world, they kind of put, am I mistaken? Is that the place where they put all the girls in was it in concentration camps or something? They kind of pushed them out of certain public spaces. And so there were no other women in their version of the White House except for
I think
and her Asian assistant.
Right.
But her Asian assistant gets the power. And this is after it's revealed to the world that they can, kind of pass it on or spark it up in older women. So she kind of forces the Asian girl to turn her powers on. Mm-hmm. But then she does the most horrendous shit. She kills her husband, the president, right, and she sets up the Asian chick after killing her.
Right.
And sets it up to where it looks like the Asian assistant killed the president.
Right.
And for some strange reason in this particular country, once the president is dead, she becomes the president. I've never seen that anywhere else. It ain't, it ain't like, when the president, something happens to him, his wife takes over. But apparently in this country, that's what happens. So she becomes the president.
Oh, yeah.
Which was her goal, I think, the whole time. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And you see her kind of use that, I don't know what that ankle thing was. I don't know if it was an ankle monitor or some type of suppressant she was supposed to have on her. I don't understand what that is.
It followed, it recorded who uses electricity. So she couldn't get caught using electricity because you're right. They use these little ankle monitors to determine who had the power and who was using it.
Right. And again, we try to like her. We try to like her early on because it was actually his country that discovers the organ, because they were the ones that were doing the experiments on the girls and removing the organ. Of course, all the girls died in the process. Mm-hmm. So, his attitude was, remember, this is the country where they have all this trafficking. Women are more or less treated as products.
Right.
So he really doesn't care.
Right.
But at some point, you see her befriend this Asian assistant. And at first, they look like they have some type of relationship, some type of, lesbian relationship going on. Uh-huh. But as we find out, that was just her playing the Asian girl to get her trust. Because right. I get the kind of impression she had always planned to at least act against or move against her husband. So yeah, she murders him. She sets up the Asian girl and tells everybody that she had the power and she killed her husband.
Right.
And even when she becomes like this ruler, you see her become like this seductive ruler where she has this man, kneel before her and all this other stuff.
The general of the military.
Right, right.
Kissing her rings and, whatnot. So she's this seductive, powerful, figure.
She's like, like a Bond villain almost.
She is. But the other twist to this is that while this is happening, women in the country who are locked up in these little, brothels, the women who are being trafficked, right? They get the power as well. And they start killing the men that have, trapped them there, of course, and they liberate themselves, and then they go out and find a place to be. And so they're kind of out there. And it turns out the leader of this group of women who are escaping, trafficking, the leader, who is pregnant. So they have this weird scene where she gives birth. I don't know. But the woman leader there is her sister, the new president's sister.
Right.
Right. So they're kind of, and between the two of them, they coordinate the mass death of a lot of the military.
Right.
She sends the military out to supposedly kill these women that have killed a bunch of men that are escaping, trafficking. And then she sends word that the military is coming to her sister.
Right.
And so her sister and all those girls, they just kill off the military. You literally see Tunde is here in Carpathia.
Right.
He goes out there and he's going to meet with the women who are out in the woods or whatever. He's already met with them once. He's going out there and you just see bodies of soldiers floating in the river.
Right.
Dozens of bodies just floating by in the river, all military. None of the women get killed from what we can see.
Right.
Only men.
Yeah, and we also start to see how the destabilization of the economy is happening, because I think these women who were trafficked or being slaves, they had action taken over like a northern section of the country. And it's funny you mentioned her sister being pregnant, because that fascinated me, because when she was having that baby, I'm like, what if it's a boy? What are they going to do if it was a boy? And of course they made it a girl, which is what they wanted. But I want to say, were they going to keep that baby if it was a boy?
I don't know, because one of the things you also see in Carpathia is the men. Yeah, now, these are not apparently abusers. These are basically everyday dudes and their sons, and they're going out and living in the woods and getting out of the cities. And so you just see them by the side of the river, just kind of sitting there.
It's that Lord of the Flies. You see this destabilization of when the women get in power. You see the men kind of just drifting out into poverty to rough it in the woods.
So that's kind of the story of Carpathia. So again, each one of these stories we're telling you, they're all happening at the same time.
Right.
And it's really kind of chaotic, even from a storytelling standpoint. But let me see. I don't think I got everybody, but at least, shit, man. I guess we do got to cover this. we got to cover this. So John Leguizamo, it gets to the point where he's frustrated. First, I think the first thing that frustrated him, what was it? Was it when
I think they first had a fight because he had leaked the information about how they were going to solve this problem.
What was the solution they came up with, though? I'm blank.
They were going to put some type of drug or hormone in the water.
That's right.
That would make the power dormant, and he leaked it to his college buddy who was a journalist.
Right. And so he leaked it, and they went into a party with the governor, and it was all over the news by the time they got into the party with the governor, and she knew he did it. Right. And so he's sitting there. Now, the Manosphere Highlights Daily made a brilliant point. He said the only time John Leguizamo's character ever stood up to his wife is when he was drunk.
Right. Yeah.
So he gets drunk at the party, and he starts to buck up against her. He starts to push off against, the social expectation of how he's supposed to behave. And by the time they get home, he throws an all-out tantrum. And that's when he's talking about, you never asked me about my day and this and that. He's throwing a full-on tantrum. And then the tantrum is so bad, he goes out the back door and I guess they have a lake right behind the house. He jumps into the lake. Now, this is in the middle of the night. He's in a suit, and he's throwing a full-on tantrum about her behavior and how she treats him and this and that. So, but after which the family is still kind of doing these public, scenes, where they're out in public showing to be the ideal family. They're still kind of doing this thing. And I'm skipping over a lot to get to this, but, basically they end up going camping. And feel free to backtrack anything I've covered, I didn't cover, but they decide to go camping. That's where this scene takes place. Right. And it's revealed that the son has turned in the boyfriend. The son publicly announced to everybody with video that his sister's boyfriend had the power.
Right. And by this time, Mayor Lopez had just gotten the power from her daughter, and she didn't tell her husband
She didn't tell her husband. Yep.
that she had this power.
Right.
And we also see the son. By this point, we had a couple of scenes with Urban Docs where he's getting really in deep, and he's already had a couple of arguments with the sister about it.
Yep.
And so she's kind of fed up about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's even argued with his father about it.
Yeah. Because we see we see a couple of occasions where the dad comes in and tries to dissuade the son from listening to this content. And I mean, there's even one scene, and it jumped out to me because the boy tells his dad, the girls are mean.
Yes.
Yes. And he uses that, that's because they like you.
Yeah, that dismissive bullshit. The interesting thing, though, I gotta say, when they get to that scene and he points out that the girls are mean, you know what I thought of? I've taught elementary school through college in the last 25 odd years, right? I taught college most of the time, but sometimes I would also teach elementary, middle school, and high school in the day. And one of the things I noticed is at every grade level, I heard Black boys making the same statement.
Yeah.
About Black girls. That's what I thought was interesting. So when this white boy in this series is saying the girls have changed, they're mean now. They shock you just because you don't even have to do anything. They abuse you. Right? It was interesting because even the way he said it was so reminiscent of boys I've seen, Black boys in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And even college. Let's be real about this shit. I have heard this at every level where these young men, once you get them in a room talking, and they're like, these girls are mean. And it was the same way, the way they described it.
I thought that was so, because it reminded me of a Facebook post I made about a conversation I heard with a school administrator in an all-Black school district. And he was talking to this charitable organization, and they were talking about the problems they were having in the school district. And it wasn't necessarily reading or math. He said the biggest problem we're having is the girls are extremely violent, and the teachers are afraid to have them in the class. They're more violent in the boys.
Yeah, because they have no checks and balances.
Right. There you go.
We don't really punish girls. We don't punish women. I mean, statistically, women serve 65% less sentences for the same crimes as men. So even when they're adults, we don't, as a society, really punish women. We don't even really acknowledge female evil. What we do is when a woman acts, quote unquote, out of character, we assume that a man caused it. And if she says a man caused it, that's enough to get her off. I mean, we have literally seen women get off crimes for menstruation. I mean, if you don't believe me, check out the book, The Myth of Male Power, where they actually cite the cases where women have gotten off over menstruation. So as a society, we don't deal with women well as far as accountability. So women, I think in many ways, even girls have become very entitled and are willing to be more violent, even grown women, in terms of abuse, intimate partner violence. There are very few repercussions. Women statistically don't go to jail.
No,
it really doesn't happen. So it's not surprising that women would feel this liberated to attack people because they don't have repercussions, which makes this series even more problematic, because if you actually add to the power women have in a system where there's very little female accountability, you already have women that are used to being violent because they can. What happens when they can kill you on sight? What kind of things happen? But anyway, so in this particular scene, once it's revealed that the elder daughter's boyfriend has been revealed to the public, she freaks out, and the first thing she tries to do is kill her brother.
And she literally says it. Yeah, I'm going to kill you.
I'm going to kill you. And the only reason it doesn't happen is the mother uses her power to deflect the bolt.
Right.
Now, this is an opening. This is an important moment for John Leguizamo, because he didn't know his wife took the power.
Right.
He didn't know that the daughter had sparked it in her. He didn't know any of that. So, first we had the scene where she decides that she wants to run for Senate and she doesn't consult him.
That's right.
Now we find out that, she's got the power and she didn't consult him. So both the males are frustrated at the women in the family for different sets of reasons. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's in this scene where they're sitting together and he's drinking, and he calmly looks over to her and he says, "You know what? I'm going to support you through this. I'm going to be there for you." And she's even starting to smile because he's, saying, "I'll be there for you." And he says, "But once this is over, I want a divorce."
There you go.
And this is the scene where he reveals that he wants a divorce. Now, the whole series so far, he's been the cheerleader, he's been the support one, he's been the one in the family to try to keep everybody together. And when it's revealed that women have this power alongside his wife's political career, he's in her corner. This is all he's been talking about. But now you start to see him fraying at the edges. Now you see him starting to doubt all of these things that he stood for the longest. And the same, I think, and you can correct me if you feel the same way, because Tunde never says anything out loud, but I think by the end, Tunde is starting to question this too. By the time you see the military killed and Tunde,
right.
This is where you have feminist men who have been supporting this so-called revolution against the patriarchy, starting to realize that this doesn't have anything to do with a revolution against the patriarchy. This is a power flex. This is revenge porn, simply for the sake that they can. And I think you start to see men like these feminist men start to step back and say, oh shit, what have I done?
Right.
What have I helped with?
Right. Because all the time he was talking about how this is going to be a revolution. We're going to have a true matriarchy and they're going to show us a better way. Mm-hmm. And like going back to Carpathia, where he sees all these dead bodies that were just indiscriminately killed. He starts to have doubt. But even in this scene right here, like the Manosphere Highlights Daily was talking about, he was drinking again. This is the only time you see him being honest.
Right.
Every other time he's the perfect Stepford wife. But when he drinks, the truth of who he is comes out. And even I'm looking at this image right here. She's in the power position with the hand on the shoulder.
Right.
Right. She's constantly wifing him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's complaining about, like you said, like some women would do, like the feminine person would do in a relationship. You made decisions without consulting me.
Right.
Right.
But
go ahead.
Oh, which is very beta, and that's his character, and they, like you said, in the interview they did with him, they were trying to sell this to us as the new masculinity, but really, it's the new masculinity on feminist terms. But in these scenarios, they don't ask men how men see the change in masculinity or how men see the change in gender roles. They don't ask men. And this is one of the reasons the Manosphere exists. And not just the Manosphere, a number of different ventures where men have started to express themselves outside of the socially expected roles that we're supposed to play. Men are pushing at the boundaries because women are setting the terms. And then women are going into media, and this includes Black women, because, Black women have had, as far as TV and movies, far more access than we've had since the 1980s. But they'll go into these spaces and they'll try to prescribe to men what our new masculinity should look like.
Right.
This is what they're trying to do. They've been trying to tell us, and this is because they don't want us to determine it for ourselves. And this is why the Manosphere scares people. Hell, this is why the Manosphere is as intense as it is, because it's bottled up rage and frustration in and of itself over decades, and men didn't even have a platform to communicate with each other outside of being supervised by women.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Even when men, think about it, men get together at a family event, what do? They usually sit in the front room with the game on, like at a Thanksgiving or something of that nature, or Christmas. The women would go in the kitchen or into the other room. They would talk. The men would be in the living room in front of the TV watching the game, talking. But women will come in and supervise the conversation at some different point. And that's kind of what this is on a whole nother level. We're seeing media that's designed to shape and direct men. And that doesn't even speak to like the males in our community that are primarily raised in female-headed households. But a lot of it is an attempt to shape and direct what manhood is. And so now you have a blowback. You have a blowback because men are saying that's not the role I'm going to accept. Right. And I'm going to define masculinity for myself. I'm not going to allow you to do it. And I think that scares the shit out of a lot of people. So I think the series even kind of shows that to an extent. But go ahead.
Right. And that's the one thing that bothers me, because it talks about how, I think it was the teenage girl said women don't have any voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, women don't have any voices. And like you were mentioning with the football game, I'm like, there's nothing that men have that women have not invaded.
Right.
Okay. Right. Now they have their stuff, but everything that we have has to be female compliant.
Yes.
I mean, just going over the decades, the fire department, the police department, the barber shop, the gym,
toys.
All of that has been invaded. The gaming industry, that's been invaded. You know, we
Toys,
talk about
television shows. Yes.
the MCU. It's now the MCU has been
Yes.
taken over.
Yes.
You
It
know,
has to cater to women.
exactly. Now I don't want to necessarily go to, but even when you talk about on YouTube into these man spaces, at one point we saw an explosion of female content creators. Don't hate them or anything like that, but they were coming into the space, and so you know, it's like y'all don't have a voice,
But
but where can we go?
They came into the space during the pandemic where, you know, and I would argue if you didn't have the pandemic, you probably wouldn't have had the boom, the same kind of boom in the manosphere you did. You might not have even had a Kevin that was the first to break 1 million subscribers out of this space, right? You might not have had that, but you had a captive audience. And I can say many of some of our channels boomed during that period because you had a captive audience at home that couldn't go anywhere, and they got tired of, you know, pre-programmed television. Right. And, you know, watching stale movies they'd already seen before. So you could go to YouTube and for free watch all kinds of creative content, some interesting, some shitty, whatever. And sometimes the shitty ones are interesting just because they're shitty. But anyway, you know, you had all of this imagination and this intensity coming from everyday people making their own content. But in the midst of all that, you had men who were deciding for themselves and having conversations among themselves about what the hell is going on and comparing notes. And so with that, you know, these women came into the space not before the pandemic. They came in the middle of it. And this is not long after. Remember, people were fighting over toilet tissue and people were worried about jobs and worried about being, you know, evicted, and you had the rent moratoriums, but people were barely holding on. This is at the same time that all of that is happening. So in other words, it was taking place at a time where they were starting to question the value of men again. Because this is after decades of I don't need a man.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you have this massive economic insecurity going on. And I remember a couple of people started to talk about it the first few months when this whole the grocery store toilet tissue thing happened. And they were seeing how women at the grocery stores were there with their husbands.
There you go.
And sometimes fighting over water and toilet tissues, but their husbands were fighting. Not the women. And except for black women were in the stores with their kids alone. Right. And so that I think, you know, those kind of scenarios help spawn the question, maybe I do need a man, do it. And instead of, you know, actually engaging men and listening, you had a lot of women that came into the space just to argue. And really what that is, it's kind of a mommying, because that's the position they're used to being in. They will come into a space full of men talking and correct what they don't like. And men for a long time would acquiesce to, in my opinion, to too great a degree. You started to see, though, when they tried to come in and correct men stopped acquiescing, and men started pushing back. And even in this last few months, man, with the NFL player, was named Travis, with even
Travis Rudolph.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm starting to see more men pushing back, like the teenage boy in this series. They're coming to online content. They're starting to think about and study what's going on with men. And they're starting to push back in ways that I've waited my entire life to hear men do.
Right. Because, you know, we always thought these things, always felt this way. But when you get on YouTube, it's like, okay, I'm not the only one. You know, so they're of the mindset that watching this content is making them like, no.
Just like the power, just like the electricity.
Exactly. You know, before YouTube came along, I was having these problems. I was having these thoughts. It's just that now that I can see people, I say, okay, I'm not the only one that's seeing this. Okay, here's what's going on in my life. What's going on in yours?
And
we're starting to see the pattern. You know, they don't like the organizing aspect of it, I suppose.
Yeah,
men wising up,
and nobody knows where it's going to go. Is it going to go political? Is it going to go? I mean, now you have men across race leaving the country for girlfriends, wives, even just sex partners. I mean, this is scaring the hell out of a lot of people because they don't know where it's going. And truth be told, the men don't know where it's going.
Right. I mean, we saw that. What was the New York Post did that article that said 63% of men now are electively single. So now they're starting to see, okay, men are leaving the park. They're not playing the game anymore.
But what's disingenuous is the way they're positioning these articles is to say men are single because they're incels and they're failures.
Right.
And they keep wording these articles this way. And women, of course, like it because it positions them in a great, you know, it puts them in a great position. Men are pushing back against those as well. is you have men saying you are mischaracterizing what we're doing and why.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't stepped back from this because I'm an incel that can't get women. I'm stepping back from this because it's ridiculous. And the expectations of me are fantastically horrible, and I get nothing out of it. Right. You know, they don't want to talk about how much data men are sharing with each other, how much analysis is going on, you know, terminology we're developing, you know, looking at history and starting to pull out areas that have been downplayed historically. I mean, in my book, I posted a quote from Martin Luther King where he talks about the Black matriarchy in America. Now, you tell me, when's the last time you discussed Martin Luther King in school and somebody mentioned that he acknowledged that there was a Black matriarchy?
Never. Only I Have a Dream.
Never. Right. So now you have men going into history and pulling out things that were never really told to us. And shout out to Dead Set Anime. He asked a question a while ago about the lightning energy that these women have. He said, does it have any use outside of violence? They try to explore that a little bit. You know,
we see a woman charging a battery and a phone, and that's about it, really.
Yeah, they dance with it and share it with each other, but you know, it's debatable. But we still have some other characters to get to. But you know, well, I guess we can at least finish Seattle on the great debate. You want to do that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we have the mayor here who's running for Senate, and she's debating the governor over. You know, they're having their first publicized debate, and it's implied that the mayor's son is feeding information to Urban Docs, and Urban Docs is feeding information to the governor.
Right.
So implying that there's this all man kind of connection of feeding information against the mayor, and he's getting in her ass in this debate.
Yep.
He's getting in her behind at every turn. He's getting at her. And you want to cover it?
Yeah, because I think at this point, the Urban Docs people or person contacts the son and asks him essentially to be a spy for his mother or a spy on his campaign.
Right.
And even that whole conversation was kind of weird. You know, I forgot they used that Mission Impossible language, which is kind of silly to me.
Right.
But yeah, so he's excited to be working with Urban Docs, and you know, as they go to the debate, it's obvious because the things that the governor is saying is only information that either her and her family would have. Right. So you're starting to see the connection between Urban Docs and the governor, and I think the show kind of tipped its hand because I think at one point there was a montage where the mayor was speaking, and you see Urban Docs overlaid with the image of the governor.
Okay.
And I caught that, so maybe that's a clue that maybe he's behind it. But in the debate, he's just killing her.
Yeah,
and he's bringing up all this stuff about her husband possibly being the link, and she can't be an effective leader because she can't control her children. And she brings up the fact that the sister tried to kill the son on a couple of occasions.
Right.
Which is, of course, is a clue because who else would know that?
Who would know it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's when she just, that's when she just loses it and just blasts him.
Yeah. Now, mind you, this is a debate on television, right? It's being watched all over. So she shocks him on television and he's incapacitated, right? Laying on the floor. But she does it in a fit of anger. So she's really proving his point that women are basically out of control. They're dangerous, and you can't have a stable society with a bunch of people going around killing folks. Like she really kind of proves his point, when he gets her to break character and shoot him, which she does. So that's where the last episode of the season ends. And I haven't found any clear confirmation if they're going to do a season 2, but it's very damning. The debate is very damning, about this whole question of because the women are trying to say, look, don't worry about it. This is just evolution. It is what it is. Maybe it's for us to protect ourselves, but it's not a major issue. And by the time she shocks him on TV in front of everybody out of an emotional explosion, she kind of proves his point that this is dangerous. Right.
And that's what I was, wondering, because I haven't read the book, of course, but I was kind of wondering because the show on the surface wants you to kind of believe this is a good thing, but when you watch it, it really doesn't come across that way. And as I was in the show, and like, okay, so Was the author trying to get us to see that this women in being controlled is a bad thing, or are they trying to get us to see that
Oh,
women are no different than men?
well, let me say this first. Shout out to Ninja Person, says the shock is the masculinist turn in the show. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. But so when I read about the author's intentions, one of the things that she, from what I'm told, mentions is that her idea was to say that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
That was her intentions. Now, I think the feminists that produced this and decided to put it together, I don't think they were concerned with showing how unbridled power, can turn anybody into a monster. I think their intention was to make this like some type of feminist liberation. But it ends up just like Why the Last Man, just like what's the other one? Something County, or Country, something Country. What was the other show series?
Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to say earlier. Those are the three series that reflect each other to me. You got Lovecraft Country, you got Why the Last Man, and you got the Power, and all three of them are these kind of feminist revenge porn kind of things at different points. Lovecraft plays with race more than the other two do, though.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, it's just this whole kind of moment where everything goes to shit, and these women really become monsters. I mean, every one of the women you see on the screen has become a monster, and all of them except maybe one has killed somebody.
Right.
All of them except maybe one, and we still have one more to talk about. But so that I think that's part of it. I think some of these series even get a little confused because you have this attempt to have this feminist liberation, and then you have this mixture with this Lord of the Flies narrative where everybody's just killing each other and fighting for power, and none of it suggests that women are any more primed for power than anybody else, even though you would think that's what they were trying to prove.
They're more volatile.
Yeah, and even the show makes them more volatile. They're killing people. I mean, sometimes it's in self-defense, but a lot of the time it's an emotional explosion at an argument.
Right.
I mean, you kill your little brother because he's holding the remote control. Now, granted, in that scene, it's agreed that it was an accident. It just came out of her. She didn't have any control over it. But the second time she tried to kill him,
that was clear.
They were arguing. She says, "I'm gonna kill you." Yeah, you know. And they try to, at a certain point, liken the power to men's physical, the physical superiority, right? Being stronger and bigger. They try to liken the two at a certain point to suggest that men's power is physical strength, and this kind of catches women up. They kind of try to present that at a certain point, because there's a conversation Tunde is having with a friend of his who's getting married. Okay. And on the day of his marriage, he's not sure if he wants to marry his wife because his fiance, because she gets the power. And he says, "I don't know if I'd be head of my household. I don't know what she's going to do with it. She might shock me with it. She might kill me with it." And Tunde's response is, "Well, has she?" As if to say, because she hasn't, you're worrying about nothing. And then he says, "This is going to be a great shift. It's going to be a great revolution. It's going to move everybody forward." And this is, I think this was after Saudi Arabia, but it was before Carpathia. So when by the time you start to see soldiers dead, his face is changing, and you can see he's starting to doubt whether or not he's on the right side.
Yeah, because he's starting to have some PTSD at this moment. Like loud noises are bothering him.
Yeah. And he's almost been killed a couple times. And we didn't even mention the new president of Carpathia, or whatever it is, Carpathia. She actually locks him. No, he's locked up. He's locked up by the male president.
Right.
And she comes out to set him free, to send a message to her sister. So they're using him strategically, but at each one of these moments, he knows that he can die. He knows that these women can take his life at any turn. And even though a couple of them almost do, he's still, fighting along their side. Right. But the last one we haven't talked about is the black woman you see in this image here with the snake on her shoulder. And it's not an accident that they put a snake there. It's not that she runs around with snakes or anything. It's just, she's actually, hers is the most religious in terms of how it's presented. Right. So she's adopted by this white couple. She doesn't speak at all. And then she starts, hearing this voice.
Right.
This woman's voice. Well, go ahead. You want to add in on that?
Yeah. She hears this woman's voice that she interprets as being God.
Yes.
And they want you to know right off the bat, this is a religious family. They go to church every Sunday.
Right.
But she doesn't talk because, and they let us know they have a clue, is that her not talking isn't because of anything physically wrong with her, that she's going through some type of a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So she goes to church. She hears the voice. She's not really comfortable around her parents. And I think it's around this time she opens her mouth for the first time when they're coming back from the store.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're sitting at dinner.
Sitting at dinner. Right. And she says to them essentially, I don't belong here. Now, we get, like you said, we get some clues that something is going on, something there's some type of abuse going on.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes back to her room. And that's when we see the father come up to discipline her, that we realize what was going on.
Yeah.
That he had been inappropriate with her, to keep it clean.
Yeah.
So to say. Yeah. And that's when she more or less uses her powers to fight back and to basically kill him. But the thing that's so interesting is that while this is going on, the wife seems to know this is routine, because she's downstairs and she can hear the banging. She doesn't object or anything. She just goes in the kitchen and turns the volume up.
Yeah.
So she's complicit in all of this.
She's complicit, which is very reminiscent of the slave plantation, right?
Right.
Where white women, this kind of sisterhood across race doesn't exist in slavery, right? So they're kind of, in my opinion, there was a kind of subtle kind of nod to that, where, she knows that this young Black girl, her husband is up there violating her. And instead of saying anything or doing anything about it, she ignores it. Right. And then after her husband is killed, you see her pop up later in the series on TV and stuff, trying to advocate for her husband and trying to find this Black girl that killed her husband. Right. So she's still, out there, not only refusing to admit what her husband did, but actually, advocating for her capture around the killing of her husband. Right. So it says a lot about white women's roles and complicity in a lot of this.
There you go.
But this, so, from there, the Black girl just literally walks out and she goes on this kind of journey. It's almost like 40 days in the desert, but I don't want to get to. But anyway, it's just, she's going on this long walk, and she's, interacting with people, and she's kind of going through this process where she's hearing this voice who's supposed to be, God as female, telling her what to do and kind of preparing her for an almost messianic role in the world. Like God is preparing her to be the next Christ figure of sorts. And this is why she has the power. And the girl, and the voice is telling her from the beginning, you're going to lead, so on and so forth.
Right. Now her name is Allie, but at some point she calls herself Eve, which is interesting because that's the first rebel. The first woman that rebelled, and that's where you see the whole serpent over her shoulder, which is letting us know that this woman is talking to the devil, much like the way Eve was.
See, and you can't help but wonder, if you're a feminist writing this messianic supposed figure, and you have her doing things that are devil oriented, it's like, what are you trying to say? Because as a feminist, I'm not expecting you to position her as the acolyte of the devil. But you are. So it's kind of confusing where this is all supposed to go, because you expect her to be, this figure that leads women to a new era, and she's, but eventually, so she has different encounters with people,
right?
And we
see her. Yeah, we see her try to help a young was a father and his daughters on the side of the road, and they're something's wrong with their car. They can't get it going. And she offers help, and immediately we see how he's dismissive of her. You can't possibly help me, honey. You're a girl. You can't fix this car.
Right.
But even when she does, there's an accident that happened because the little girl touches her while she's charging the battery. And immediately the father comes out and just assumes that she's the guilty one, throws her down. And then you hear the voice telling her, see, this is what happens when you try to help them.
Right. So it's a father with his two little daughters, side of the road, broken down car. She comes to help. She starts the car with her power. The little girls want to see what it is. Did one of them get shocked or almost shocked?
Yes, I think she touched her hand while she was touching the battery, and she got burned or something like that.
Yeah. And then the father comes and rescues his daughters. He basically pushes her down, throws his kids in the car, and they drive off.
Right.
And the voice, just kind of says, see, in essence, this is how men are. You know, it's very much like, Wonder Woman coming out, coming out of the island of Amazons for the first time. Most of these stories are kind of just like, look how horrible men are, right?
Exactly.
No matter what you do. But she eventually makes her way to this. I almost called it a convent, but it's not.
Yeah.
What is that? How would you describe
that? That's funny because she passes out in the desert, and Sister Maria comes to rescue her.
Right.
Now, it's not a convent. We find out later that it's not a convent, and Sister Maria really isn't a sister, so to say. But it's like this place for nuns who are rejected by the church.
Get it?
Yeah, and we find, and this goes back to our theme about how the minority male characters are effeminate, while the white male characters are masculine. And we find out that Sister Maria is actually Brother Maria.
She's trans, yeah.
But of course, that's the hero. That's the new masculinity. That's what they want us to be. And so you have this place of rejected nuns, and they also seem to be taking in these girls with these powers.
Yes. And I'm skipping. Somebody said Themyscira earlier. Thanks, Kenneth. Absolutely. But no, what you see later is that the trans nun becomes one of the converts.
Right.
And it's almost kind of a little statement about, stepping away from God and embracing this new religion. But, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because at this point, she's rising up. She gets there. She's kind of quiet, but over time, she starts to rise up amongst the girls and become popular.
Yeah.
And she essentially starts her own cult.
She does.
But the girls start to worship her.
They start to worship her. And it's one of the reasons is because she's able to do things the other ones haven't even fathomed. She actually, one of the girls has an ongoing thing with having these fits. What do you call them?
Seizures, I think.
Yeah, they're seizures. Thank you. And she actually kind of cures them, right? So, she's one that uses her powers differently. All the girls are in the ocean playing around, and she actually uses her power in the water to control movement. She controls animals at different points in time. So she's able to do things with her powers that the others, they're just shooting electricity out of their fingers. She's actually controlling people. She's actually healing people. Like, she's going above and beyond, and you're trying to figure out this whole time if she's actually good or bad. They kind of go back and forth, so you don't really know where the show is trying to take her.
Right. And that's one of the things that they do, because at some point the eldest sister, I think her sister Veronica, she's skeptical of her, and she kind of sees her as being evil.
Oh yeah.
And word gets out about her being wanted for killing her abusive father. Now, and this goes back to another thing we talk about in the show, how these women, they kill a lot of people.
Right.
But they always have a justification for what they've done. And she gives a speech like, yeah, I killed him, and it felt good. He deserved it.
Yeah.
Right. But she, Sister Veronica, she doesn't really like the girl. She tries to get rid of her, and she promises that she's going to report her to the police. And that's when she makes a move on Sister Veronica, which is essentially kills her.
Well, yeah, but how did it go down, though? I mean, remember, she first thing she did, she didn't just kill her outright.
That's right. She tried to change her mind or something. Yeah.
Well, she was manipulating her brain waves or brain patterns, and she was trying to make her like her.
Right.
And what ended up happening? She ended up the woman was bleeding from her eyes. I mean, I don't know what ended up kind of happening, but it didn't work well. Like, she tried to control the sister's mind, and for a while, the sister just damn near worshipped her. Right. Then at one point, you see her bleeding from her eyes, and then what happened from there? Did she die at that point?
Yeah, I think the EMS everyone called. They said it was like a brain hemorrhage or something like that. They thought it was stigmata, of course, because they see her as some type of a saint. But the video of her healing the girl with the seizure triggers, dozens of other girls to show up to the camp.
Yes.
Because now she's this new messiah.
Right. And then she starts trying to prophesize to the girls, most particularly about Roxy, who is the character, the second from the left, whose mother was killed by her father. Right. So Eve is telling her followers a soldier is coming. So by the time you get to the end of the episode, Roxy trying to escape her father, makes it out to where this little place is, where Eve is, and they even have a little bit of a battle
Right.
where Eve is able to shut down Roxy's power because Roxy's standing in the ocean, and Eve uses her powers to shut down Roxy's powers because Roxy has seen Eve on the internet, and she thinks she's a fake.
Right.
So the first thing they have is a confrontation, and Eve shuts down her power, which impresses Roxy. But then Roxy gets her powers back and shocks Eve, which impresses Eve. So they suggest that you have this union that Eve's been prophesizing about, talking about the coming of a great soldier or something of that nature, right? So they're kind of playing these kind of games with the series.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is, so I mean, obviously there's a lot left out because you're not going to cover, somewhere between, 7 and 9 hours of a series, in a little bit over an hour and 40 minutes. It's just a lot that's going to be left on the table. But I wanted to give you guys an overview, so you can see the kind of consistency that we've been seeing in these shows, these movies, and these series in this last number of years that are really, really focused on, this kind of revenge porn. And I don't think it's accidental that it's happening at the same time where women like Kathleen Kennedy are starting to finally be questioned. Right. And there are rumors about whether or not she's been fired. I've been hearing these rumors for years, so I take it with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, I can say because of Indiana Jones, the Star Wars series, even the Mandalorian, all the stuff she's been doing over the years. Now Disney and other corporations are starting to say, okay, we're losing too much money. We've been offending our fans for years. And I think they've really been hoping that this wave of, feminists and LGBT were going to come in and become their new consumer base. I don't think it worked. I think there's been too many box office bombs, and now they're starting to clean house.
Right.
They're starting to clean house, but in the midst of all of that, we're starting to see these kind of series be questioned in ways that we were waiting for 4 or 5 years ago, but now it seems like it's starting to happen. Do you see any connections there?
Yeah. I mean, we go back to 2015, when Trump was running for office. And but even before that, it was in Obama's second term, and we understood that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next nominee. And we started to see Hollywood get behind this moment of women are going to be in power. Women are going to be in power. Mm-hmm. And we start to see these movies come out to kind of, I guess, parallel Hillary's rise to presidency or what they thought would happen. So we saw the Rey Star Wars trilogy.
Right.
And that whole Mary Sue mess. Then we had the Ghostbusters all-female cast. Mm-hmm. Wonder Woman came out, and then Marvel decided they were going to get into the mix, and they brought in Brie Larson to be Captain Marvel. That movie was a bunch of feminist rage. Mm-hmm. And, you had the Avengers, and they had the female Avengers unite. And it's all been parallel with this moment where we're going to have women rise up and take over. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it's been going, I'll say, since 2015, 2016. And now we're starting to see this pushback. Mm-hmm. We talk about, I don't want to get off too topic, but we talk about how Hollywood is now trying to get into anime because that's been the one space that hasn't bought into all of this stuff, mm-hmm. so to say. Mm-hmm. It still kind of caters to the fan base. Mm-hmm. But it's the pushback is there. And we've been going through this for 6, 7, 8 years.
Right.
I think Disney has lost on what was $180 billion. Lost everything on Disney Plus. Damn.
Damn. Let me take care of a little housekeeping real quick. Shout out to MLR. Much appreciation for the Cash App. Shout out to Donnie. Shout out to Draga. Growth Talk Kova. Appreciate the support. Only One John, appreciate that. Bed Mike, appreciate that. And most of these I put on the screen earlier. It's just in the flow of conversation. I usually don't interrupt unless it's consistent with that. But I want to make sure these brothers get their shout out. Dardar, Mr. Me Too, Lionel Player One, and Ghetto User, Donnie, Bed Mike again. Shout out to Wild Bear becoming a new member of the Onyx Brotherhood. Welcome. Swing Out Museum. There's a brother from Asia. I can't read the name, so I apologize. Brandon, Hurricane, M. Lavo, David, yeah. So shout out to everybody that's donated and supported. But like I said, I usually put it on the screen as we go, unless I've missed it. But yeah, but overall, man, I think you're right. I mean, I think these series are finally started to, be called into question, just even on the basis of whether or not it's yielding a profit for the companies that are producing it. And worse yet, after we saw what happened with Bud Light, now these companies, I think, are terrified. They're actually terrified that the blowback will, bankrupt them in one degree or another. I mean, Bud Light went from, this kind of pro LGBT stance to, going right back to men and women sipping drinks at the bar again. Like they switched up real fast because, because people were finally fed up. I mean, the same thing happened, I think, with Target. Target was doing some kind of LGBT thing with clothes. And so, people are starting to push back against what they perceive as kind of forced messaging.
Yeah.
I think it's a little worse than that. But anyway, they're pushing back against it. Now these companies are on their heels. And I think we're seeing it culminate with Indiana Jones.
Yeah. And even with the contrast of that, we've seen Top Gun, the sequel, that did great. Didn't have any of that messaging. As a matter of fact, they didn't like it because it didn't have any of the messaging. I don't know what Mission Impossible, it just came out Wednesday, but I saw that Mission Impossible movie. Didn't have any of that crap in there. So it'll be interesting to see what the box office was going to be. And I mentioned this in the video. So it's the whole thing is a house of cards that's falling down.
Oh yeah.
As I was telling somebody, not that the Flash had it in there.
Oh yeah.
But the perception that it was going to be in there. But like, even with the Flash, the weekend that the Flash was tanking at the box office, you had Demon Slayer breaking servers out because it was so popular. Wow. In the conclusion of their season 3. So they're noticing there's a pushback. They're noticing that the companies that are not pushing that stuff are making all the money.
Well, when you get to Flash, you got the Supergirl that, I'm not against Supergirl. I've grown up reading comics. I didn't have a problem with Supergirl. I didn't particularly like this rendition of her, but I think it was a little mixture of how, they kind of did that. But I think the bigger issue was the star of the movie. What's his name?
Ezra
Miller. Right. His behavior off screen and the fact that this movie still made it. There are rumors that when Aquaman 2 comes out, there's going to be a heavy pushback against Amber Heard for the same reason. Yeah. So now you have companies being held accountable for supporting actors that have acted horribly and then, getting rid of actors who were actually the victim. If you look at Johnny Depp, right? They got rid of Johnny, and Johnny was actually the victim in the situation with Amber, who was abusing the public's trust as far as female innocence. And so Johnny Depp's response to Disney when they've tried to get him back to come play in Pirates of the Caribbean, he said no several times. And I think the fans are supporting it. Shout out to James Cole in the comments section. He pointed out that Gillette was part of this a while back.
Yeah,
was part of the pushback. So companies are starting to feel it. We've currently got the Jonathan Majors situation where yet again you had people step away from him simply because he was accused, only to find out he was innocent. And whether or not his career will be able to restart again is a question mark. So all of these and I think, again, going back to The Power and other, shows like this, what we're seeing is so egregiously anti-male that it's being called back and pushed on. So if this doesn't get a second season, which is looking like it's not, I think it speaks to how people are really starting to call this out. And back to something you said a moment ago about Tom Cruise. This was something I was talking about over a year ago. I watched Top Gun 2. I watched Father Stu with Mark Wahlberg. And I started to notice this kind of real low-key response to woke programming in many ways. And it's very low-key. Nobody's calling anything out publicly. But one of the things you're seeing is you're starting to see strong men, in the lead characters positions, and they're not apologizing to women. They're not, they're not doing any of that. But then again, they're also not abusing them either. I think it's this kind of level. It's an attempt to balance, the presentation of men in a certain way. Because, and I've talked about this before, if you look at Top Gun 2 closely, he's actually, he's reintroducing masculinity. I mean, there's even a point where they say that the Navy even needs him, like military even need, and I think what they were referring to is they need to return to a certain type of masculinity.
Right.
The people he's training need a certain type of masculinity. So you see that scene with him and ICE, and ICE is telling him, no, the Navy needs you, the military needs you. It's a return to masculinity, and I think Tom Cruise is very clear about what he's doing. Yep. I don't think none of this is an accident. I think he's very clear about how men are presented and how he wants to see men presented. And I think that's the reasons his movies are blowing up, because it's a very conscientious approach to masculinity.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen Mission Impossible. I
haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and he's the hero in there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he saves the women.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the strong masculine figure in that one as well. So he seems to be going in the opposite direction and seeing success.
Yeah, and he's seeing success. And now these other companies are looking at this, and it's like, okay, we can start to play around with the Tom Cruise approach, or we can do the power yet again and watch it fail and burn.
Right.
And I think the fans gave them the ultimate FU with Indiana Jones, and it's not an accident that, you see the handoff from Indiana Jones to Mission Impossible. It's about to be a wreck. I mean, it's about to get bad in this next week. The numbers are going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that's going to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess. But I think the fans have spoken, and so I try to cover some of these series. I can only take so much, but I try to cover some of them. Just to kind of let y'all know, that this is the kind of shit they're putting out there. These are the kind of images and statements they're putting out there about men in particular. You decide how you want to take it, but at least know it's there. But to me, they shoot themselves in the foot with these kind of stories, because none of this suggests that women are better primed for leadership or
right.
What it to me, it's just like the author of the book of The Power said, it's absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
So, I think that's what we're seeing with some of these, but we try to cover it just to let you guys know this is how it's being presented. There wasn't a lot in this about black men other than Tunde's character, the Nigerian cat. And most of the time you see him either in Nigeria or in another country. So there's not a lot about, brothers, especially here. But there's still some overall messaging about, about men and misandry in this that has to be seen to be believed. Not that I'm telling you to see it. I'm telling you what happened so you don't have to see it. But if you're particularly curious, it's on Amazon. You can check out all 9 episodes. So any thoughts? I'm going to invite some people to come up just for a little while, but only if you've seen it. And if you have an observation or a question about, the show, you're welcome to do that. We're not going to do kind of long engagement, but if you've seen it, you have something you want to cover that we've missed, or a question you want to ask, or something, you just want to kind of get off your chest about it, you're welcome to come on up. Well, was there anything else that stood out for you in this series that we didn't get to tonight?
I think we hit all of the crucial points. Like I said, I was looking if it's going to be a season 2. Hopefully there won't be. But I think we hit it all. Hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, somebody said, Donnie says, also Andor has been nominated for an Emmy for Best Series. Yeah. That's just like the first, what was it? Was it season 1 or season 2 of The Mandalorian? Like you had these series that were going well, and then Kathleen Kennedy jumps in and shifts stuff around. And I didn't even watch the end of The Mandalorian's last season.
Season 3 was that was so tough to get through. Yeah. That was they turned that into what's the name, Bo-Katan Ray. She was the star of that season.
Yeah,
that was
and I'm not anti Bo-Ka. I'm not. She was an okay character, but the way they switched him out in his own series, which is what we saw with She-Hulk, right? Mm-hmm. They brought the Hulk in just to have her outdo him in this, and it was just. I think men are really getting tired of this shit.
Yep. So when they took out He-Man in his own series.
Oh God. Yes. They got 2 seasons, and I think I heard somewhere a 3rd season is on the way. I'm not sure.
Oh gosh.
But you're absolutely right. That was and they tried to flip it by saying, "Well, we never actually said it was He-Man's story. It's Masters of the Universe." So it really became Tila's story, in really both seasons. It was pretty much her story, and a lot of fans blew back against that. So let me see. We got Diggy in here. Diggy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, a little muffled, but I can hear you. But what did you think about The Power? Any thoughts about this?
Oh no, I haven't seen The Power yet, but I just wanted to ask a question, actually, sir.
Okay.
Since we're talking about TV series and misandry, I wanted to ask if anybody remembers the series Why the Last Man.
Oh yeah.
And why that was canceled.
I talked
because
about
that's related to this whole issue of misandry, and we need to, and that I do believe that is relevant to the question, to this discussion.
Yeah, I brought it up earlier. That's definitely.
Oh, I didn't listen. I just got in late. My apologies.
No, it's one of the series that definitely is in the same vein as this, but it did the same thing that The Power did. It kind of shot itself in the foot by the end of the season, and you didn't really see this great rise of women to heal the world. You saw it descend into some Lord of the Flies shit, and it didn't. You didn't kind of get that. And in many ways it was more honest than I expected it to be, but none of that was consistent with the feminist kind of narrative that women are inherently better, they're inherently more pure, and if we just had more women leaders, everything would fall into place. None of these stories end up confirming that narrative, and I think it either confuses the audience or it just turns the feminists off who they're trying to appeal to for these kind of shows. But what was your thought as far as Why the Last Man?
Oh, me, I didn't see Why the Last Man. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was talking to Diggy. What was your thought?
Well, I got a chance to read actually a couple of issues of the comic book when I did get a chance.
Yeah.
But I do believe that was the point that the comic book itself was trying to convey. Without men, society collapsed because women only see the top. They don't see the masses, the invisible men, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, if all and if you don't know,
I guess that's actually why the Last Man was actually trying to convey. Actually, that without men, the whole thing collapses. You're not going to see a rise of women necessarily. Lord of the Flies. Oh, that is an interesting book in itself as well.
But the feminist producer, when the feminist producer was talking about Why the Last Man being brought to the screen, she had a lot of feminist rhetoric, and I agree with you. The comic book had a very different purpose, but when the producers were talking about the series, they talked about it in a very traditionally feminist way, and then the story just kind of went left. And I think a lot of people were kind of confused. But again, you're seeing that same narrative here with The Power, and it's kind of all over the place. But they were strikingly honest. I mean, if you, what I was going to say earlier, if you're not familiar, Why the Last Man is a story where all the males, and including animals, all the males across the planet die all at once. Just drop dead. In particular. What'd you say?
Because it was based on a virus that was killing any animal that was male that has the Y chromosome.
Mm-hmm. So if he's
piloting reptiles, amphibians, birds, they're not affected by that virus. By what it's saying.
Well, there were animals. There were male animals that were dying though, and I don't know what.
Yeah, male animals, particularly mammals, specifically mammals.
Okay, I haven't seen it since it was out, but the thing about it is, even if you had a guy piloting a plane, at that moment he just died, and the plane would just fall out of the sky. You know what I mean? It was that kind of moment, and so if you haven't seen Why the Last Man, that's what it's basically about. Except that there's one guy who survives, and he most of the time he's trying to find his lost girlfriend, while at the same time not being recognized as the only male that's still alive. So he's walking around trying to find her without getting caught, and it turns out he's actually the son of the new president of the United States. Is that what it was?
The new president, played by I think it was Diane Lane. Lane or Jennifer?
Diane Lane.
Diane Lane.
Diane Lane. And I did a review of it. If you want to see, BGS and I did a review of Why the Last Man, so you can go back and check that, or you can go watch the series itself. But yeah, but thanks for bringing that up, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Oh, one more thing also, since we're talking about like how they're trying to shove a certain narrative. Um, an associate of mine through a show called Snowman in the Morning, if you're familiar with Ryan Snow. We had a discussion about shows like the Netflix series adaptation of the video game series and novel series, The Witcher, and how the writers and the forerunner were trying to impose a woke narrative on it, even with with a side series, talk about the origins of it that went completely left. It was and refused to remain true to the source. This is why Henry Cavill chose to leave the series because his condition to be on the series was that they remained true to the source. And he himself is a hardcore gamer, PC gamer who loves The Witcher. He's read the novels, and once and another one of the writers also objected to everybody trying to pose a woke narrative on that. Afterwards, Cavill left. This writer left. Cavill ends up working with Amazon to do another series on another one of his hobbies, Warhammer 40K, and people are looking forward to seeing how that will be coming out.
Right. Well,
something to look forward to. Anyway,
you have
a good evening.
You as well. Thank you, man. I want to ask my good colleague, Layman's Journal, to respond to that. But before you do, just real quick observation to Mr. Shane. Mr. Shane Vicious says, to be fair, Bo-Katan is actually more well-known than Din Djarin from her time in Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Rebels. Katie Sackhoff actually voiced her, so the interest in her is already there. I'm not questioning that. I agree with you. The problem was the way she was, used in the story to replace the main Jin character in his own Din Djarin in his own show. I mean, it didn't need to happen that way. Just do a Bo-Katan show, but the switch out is the problem. And I get that because it's called The Mandalorian, that there's some idea that you can switch the two out. But the problem is when you're with a company where the audience is really starting to fade on your projects, the last thing you want to do is piss the audience off by taking off a character, even if he's new, that everybody likes, just to shoe in a woman. I mean, and it's not a complaint against Bo-Katan as a character. It's just the optics of it, which is something Kathleen Kennedy has been known for. So, when people started pulling away from watching the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian, there's a statement being made. And because it's not been listened to, now you see it culminating in people pulling back from Indiana Jones, who, again, is being replaced in his own series by a woman.
Yeah.
Via Kathleen Kennedy. So, it's not a diss to Bo-Katan. It's just a statement about how these politics are playing out and people are not going for it. But I want to come back to Layman's Journal. I want you to respond because I know you broke down The Witcher.
Yeah. And getting back to Kathleen Kennedy, she was one of the lead producers on The Color Purple.
Right.
So she's been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
But when it came to The Witcher, I didn't play the video games or read the books. I'm going strictly off of the series. I liked the first season. It was a little convoluted, but I did like it. But it was in the second season that you started to see them kind of push The Witcher to the background. And they started to bring up, who was the girl? I forgot the little girl he was protecting. They started to bring her more into the forefront. Season 2 was okay. I didn't really care for season 1, but season 3 is when I really started to eject from it. Now he brought up the whole thing with Henry Cavill, and like they said, it's interesting how that whole thing played out because, like I said, like he was mentioning, he is a hardcore gamer and he read the books and he was pounding the table for them to stick to the canon. And so when he was nearing his exit, you start to see all these stories about him. Oh, he's an incel. He's a misogynist. He's just a gamer. He doesn't get along with women. They tried to assassinate his character simply because he wanted to get back to the canon. And so, the show by season 3, I remember that series they put. I forgot the name of it. It was a brief series about the origin of the Witcher. Absolutely terrible.
Right.
But that show it started off with promise, but it ended up in the toilet.
Yeah. So I've heard. I mean, I never got into The Witcher in either context, but I did, kind of hear about the rumblings, the politics, and how they treated Henry Cavill, especially after, what's going on with him as far as Superman. It's just, it's been real questionable what's been going on. But, I I can't really call it. But I don't think we have enough people that saw the series that want to comment about it, and I'm not mad about that.
Yeah, like I said, I think it was the day you mentioned, I saw somebody else talking. I think Manosphere Highlights Daily was talking about it. I had not seen it, never heard of it.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Well, and I got to give it to Manosphere Highlight Daily did an excellent analysis of the series, but again, he also, put in a lot of video, and I didn't get a copy of it. I just watched it. But he put in a lot of video clips and whatnot that really drove it home. So go over there, check out Manosphere Highlights Daily. His last 3 shows, they're like around 20 minutes. They're not, he's not doing, they're not long, but because he shows the video clips and he does the analysis with it, you'll get a lot more of what we're talking about in terms of that. And I think you'll enjoy the analysis. To me, you can watch those and be good,
Yeah.
I just didn't want to respond to it. And then somebody come up and say, well, I watched the whole series and you're wrong, Doc. The opposite happens. And you'd be like, so I got to sit and watch this to make sure I can come correct. And shout out to Layman's Journal, who was willing to do that and come in here and chop it up with me about that. So it should go without saying, support the Layman's Journal channel. Go there, subscribe, check out what he's doing. Can you tell people what you got coming up next?
I just finished that, what was it? Jumping the Broom, that TD Jakes movie. The 304 for Jeebus. Check that out.
Oh man. Okay.
And I'm still trying to get this thing out with Casino and Pretty Woman. Ginger from Casino and Vivian from Pretty Woman.
Okay.
And how they, this narrative
Casino.
about,
I said that just hit me. Ginger from Casino. Damn.
Oh yeah. I want to do a contrast between them two. Ooh. But that's gonna be coming up next week or two. So we're gonna get into that one as well.
Oh my goodness. All right. You going there. You are going there. It's much appreciated though. But anything for the audience before we go, man?
Well, thank you all for tuning in. We took this bullet for you so you didn't have to watch it. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, you can let me know. You can go to my channel, and you can find me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. And let me know if you have any suggestions that you want us to check out. Please, don't punish me all the time. I can't watch all the bad stuff, but I'll be grateful. I'll be happy to break down anything you guys suggest.
Well, much appreciated, man. Thanks again for coming through.
Absolutely.
All right, man. I'll let you later.
All right.
Well, we were supposed to have BGS. He didn't come through. The reason I invited BGS is BGS actually read the book. I told him to watch the series, and he didn't watch the series. He read the book. So and we've talked about it. There's some differences that I was hoping to bring into this conversation where he could talk about that, but he wasn't able to come through, I guess. So whatever. Shout out to Omega Supreme. He says, feminist coworker that calls me a misogynist with no merit behind her calling me that tried to trick me into watching this. Well, you can come back at her and you can hit her with some information that, in response to this, if you so choose. And I love the icon Omega Supreme takes me back to the G1 Transformers that I used to collect. So it's all good. Other than that, appreciate y'all coming through. Please share your comments, your observations, your thoughts about it, especially if you've seen it. But even if you're just responding to the things we talked about, or if you have any other connections with other series that you can see happening in these kind of shows, go ahead and share it with us, so we can actually, really get on top of what's going on and what we're seeing. And there seems to be a lot of changes in the wind. I think because the economy is being more insecure than ever, or at least since 2008, we're starting to get back into that terrain of economic insecurity. You're starting to see a lot of these media companies shifting gears because they've been losing billions, and now it's time to clean house. So we're seeing a lot of firings, a lot of soft positions going other places. We're seeing a lot of that starting to happen. And a lot of it is in response to your push against what you don't want, your lack of support, your willingness to walk away. All of these things are having an effect. So don't get it twisted, man. The things you don't like, the things you are walking away from are having an impact. Even if it seems like it's a little slower than you think it should be, it's happening nonetheless. So let's track it. Let's observe it. Let's make sure we understand it, and we support the media we do want to see, whether it's in the movie theater or right here on YouTube. All right. So appreciate the support, y'all. I will holler at y'all later. Y'all have a good one. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.